Please join me in welcoming Marina Van Raay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here today. And thank you, DVSA, for giving me the space and opportunity to share my process, my story, my journey as a ceramic artist. As Alicia said, my name is Marina Van Raay. I am a ceramic artist based in Hamilton, and I am currently a full-time artist in residence at Harbourfront Center in Toronto. So thought I would start it way back. This is a photo of me and my sister with my Aunt Kathy and my Oma, and we're gearing up for a firing in the summer of 1997. You can see in the photo there the kiln in the greenhouse. So my Oma, Angela Van Raay, was an artist and a potter. These are just a couple examples of the kind of work she made. She did a lot of tile work, a lot of sculptural, as well as a lot of wheel thrown work. An incredibly creative person, super fun. She definitely passed down artistic expression throughout generations, and I really grew up in a family where creative expression was always encouraged, and just being surrounded by all that art growing up, it's definitely impacted me a lot in my ceramic journey as well as my practice today. And here's my dad. He is also a potter. He started taking pottery here at DVSA when my Oma passed. And in 2016, he introduced me to pottery. I actually got like a Snapchat memory notification right before the talk that I went on the wheel for the very first time 9 years ago today. Yeah, today was the first time my dad ever put me on the wheel, and ever since then I've been hooked. So that Christmas, he gifted me with a course term here at DVSA. And this is him at a residency in Japan. And he also likes to make a lot of wheel thrown, functional, sometimes altered stuff. He experiments in sculpting, but I also take a lot of influence and inspiration from him. Okay, so I took 3 years of classes here at DVSA, and throughout my time here, I mainly focused on creating wheel-thrown functional ware. So I liked making stuff for the kitchen, bowls, plates, mugs. And for 3 years, I was really just trying to enhance my wheel-throwing skills. And I was really enjoying the Cone 10 gas-fired earthy tones. So that's where I kind of started. And then after 3 years of classes here at DVSA, I decided to pursue my bachelor in ceramics at Sheridan. So I enrolled in the Craft and Design program at Sheridan College. And it was COVID, it was 2020, and it was a weird time to be starting school when everything was closed, but the ceramic program stayed open. But I'm really grateful that I was able to do this. And the first 2.5 years at Sheridan, I continued with wheel throwing. I think just going into the program with that being my skill, I just wanted to keep getting better at it. So I kind of stuck to the wheel thrown ware. I started realizing how much I liked pattern. So I started to do a lot of surface decoration on my pieces, mostly using like underglazes, but just tried to kind of put myself out there a little bit more with surface decoration. And then third year at Sheridan is kind of when I made that big switch from wheel throwing to hand building. Something about the hand building, the coil building, the way the textures show really was interesting to me. Also, the slowness of the hand building, I found that I was really attracted and into that. So I made that full-on switch, and I also wanted to try to get those really bright colors. So I started to use a lot of underglaze. And then I started to make a lot of lamps. I was still wanting to make things that were functional and things that you could use in the home, but I wanted to create things that could be very decorative. And then I also started doing a lot of tests on textures and glazes. So I started doing some glaze tests, using some unconventional glazes to try to really get those textures out. You can see there's a lava glaze. The middle one was called like a marshmallow. It ended up looking like abs, which I thought was really funny. And then like a glute glaze. So I started kind of experimenting and trying different things. So this was when I actually started to step away from wheel throwing. This was like one of the last pieces I've created on the wheel at Sheridan. But it was kind of what influenced me to know what I wanted to put onto my pieces. It was a teapot experiment, a teapot project actually. And the prompt was like, what does a teapot mean to you? And so immediately I thought of those intimate moments that I had with my mom and my grandma, drinking tea together. And it was just something that was a really special moment for me. And it made me realize that I wanted to put a lot of my own memories and feelings and translate them onto my work somehow. So I started to think about nostalgia and nostalgic influence. And I think nostalgia is one of those words that everybody has a very different feeling when they hear that word. For me, I think of childhood. I think of creativity, wonder, innocence, joy. And then when I think of nostalgia, I immediately go back to summer vacations I spend in Japan. So every summer break, me and my sister and my mom would go back to Japan and spend time with my family, my friends. These moments are very special to me. And yeah, every time I think of childhood nostalgia and those moments of optimism and joy, I go back to these moments. So a lot of my inspiration also draws from my admiration of Japanese pop culture, specifically the 2000s maximalism culture of Harajuku. The Harajuku culture, it can be characterized by a vibrant and eclectic mix of styles, fearless embrace of bold colors, mashup of different aesthetics, and the art of layering. And my favorite part of going to Tokyo was always going to Harajuku and going down Takeshitadori, which is just this narrow street, and it's always insanely packed. And there's fashion everywhere, there's colors everywhere, there's accessories everywhere. And that's just something that's always, that I've always been attracted to. And I've always, like, my eyes always go there. And so I started thinking about how I could incorporate these things that I like in everyday life into my ceramic practice. So using the idea of accessories in the Harajuku culture, I started thinking about how I could accessorize and decorate my own work. So I started making these charms and chains and little bits and pieces out of clay. And then, yeah, the idea was to use these to accessorize my stuff. And here you can see that a lot of my work is actually done post-firing. So if you know pottery, usually it goes in for 2 firings. There's like a bisque and a glaze. And a lot of the times when it comes out of the glaze, it's a finished piece. But I wanted to try to make a process where I could keep going after the final glaze. So I incorporate materials like wire and epoxy so that I can continue to decorate my pieces after they're done firing. So here you can see all like these bits and charms. And then I would oftentimes use wire to just kind of hang them off the piece. So this was my first large scale piece. This is around 48 inches tall. It's 2 separate pieces, the lamp shade and the lamp base. And I use the same process of kind of accessorizing this after it's come out of the final firing. Something I really enjoy about this process is that when it comes out of that glaze firing, I know that it's not finished, and I know that I can keep playing with it and keep working with it until I like the way it looks. And I feel like this makes it such a fun process for me. But yeah, this one was just, I did a lot of those charms and chains, and I love the way it kind of like cascades down, and it kind of has that visual texture of something flowing. And I was doing a lot of multicolor pieces, and I wanted to try to see how a monochromatic look would feel, or what kind of different effect it would give. I really like the way that the details are kind of camouflaged into one another and they don't kind of stand out individually, maybe as much as the multicolor. It's something I've only done a couple times and something I definitely want to go back to at some point. And just another example with the black, I did the same thing with the black and you can see, you know, the difference in the dramatic effect it has. And with the, on the right, I did the colorful, the gloop in front of the black underglaze, and that one gives me like I Spy vibes. Yeah. So I really enjoy experimenting with unconventional glaze techniques. A lot of the times these are referred to as phenomena glazes, which are glazes that have a little bit of unusual melt characteristics. So glazes like gloop, which is this drippy big one here, which I use a lot. And then crawl, which you can see the blue and the green on the right there, the glaze that kind of crawls apart once it's being fired. The lava glaze and the marshmallow glaze, which I showed earlier. I love the way that these move in the kiln, and it's always so fun to pull them out of the kiln because they're so different from how they went in. And I think that's something I really like about using these glazes. So just another piece I was experimenting with, I started adding clay, and for this one I added kind of hooks because I had to figure out how I could hang this gloop glaze, and the way they melt, it needed a place to sit on or else the gravity would just make them fall off completely. So for this one, I kind of just experimented with putting some clay, and I really liked when they kind of connected, when the two colors would connect and then become one. And that's something that I started to use after this. And this is my newer gloop glaze pieces. I took a pretty big break from then, I feel. I started to use a lot of colored clay and kind of going off in different directions. And then I started to really miss that like candy, like, you know, it just reminds me so much of like childhood, you know, excitement and optimism, and the bright colors. These are definitely one of the more like it takes a lot of time to make these, and it's a long process, but it's 100% the most satisfying to pull out of a kiln because of the difference of when it goes in and when it comes out. They become so saturated and vibrant, and then there's so much to look at. Like when I pull them out of the kiln, I can look at it for like 15 minutes just to see all of the different glazes and how each drip has melted. So I decided I could probably do more with the gloop glaze. So I started to make my charms out of that glaze. So the gloop glaze, this is it before firing. It's basically a mix of clay and glaze, and it kind of has a consistency of a clay, so you can mold it. And I found that firing it on a bed of sand was a way to keep them from sticking onto the shelf. So I started just to mold different shapes and different shapes and bits, and then I would fire them and they would come out and they would have just this like candy coated gloss on them, and something that I really liked. So yeah, just some more of the gloop little bits I was making. I love how vibrant and vivid these always come out. I started experimenting with using like a slip trailer and kind of putting like polka dots, doing a whole bunch of colors. On the left here, these are little daruma charms, which is just a traditional Japanese symbol. And so I was just using a slip trailer and kind of drawing on the glaze and just doing a whole bunch of experiments and trying to see all that I could do with this glaze. It feels weird calling it a glaze because it's like kind of clayish, but. And then also, so I was trying to see what more I could do. I was using different colored gloop, and I was just creating patterns with the different colors. And then I would slice them and again, fire them on a bed of sand. And then you can just see the difference between like the before and after, how they just kind of like very slightly melt into their shape, and then they get that nice clear glossy coating on it. The only difficulty, or not difficulty, but the only thing with this is If you overfire it, it'll just melt into like a glaze, which would be, puddly. And if you underfire it, it'll be more like clay where it won't get that candy-like coating on it. So it just took me a little bit to find that exact temperature and the exact hold at the end. So this one's called the Loaded Vessel. And here I was really, still really interested in the idea of maximalism, but I was having a hard time figuring out how far I should or can push myself. And I thought that I was maybe holding back in what I was making. And so I really tried to channel that idea of maximalism with this one and kind of let this be the piece where I take it as far as I could without thinking too much about the end product or what it's going to look like in the end. So I kind of threw all of the techniques and kind of ideas and things I was using up until this point. Using bigger charms, longer wire. I decorated the inside, I decorated the outside. And yeah, I was just trying not to think about like the idea of clashing. I think when I was thinking of maximalism, I was afraid of the idea of things clashing and things looking like too crazy so this one was like my chance to just do it without thinking about it. And I actually really ended up liking the way it came out. So, additional aspects of Japanese culture, like stickers, and these are called purikura, which is a Japanese form of photo booth. These act as inspiration in my work as well. There's something about stickers that just really embodies the essence of childhood for me, especially. I was always one to sticker everything, as you can tell, still do. But yeah, so these purikura is a form of Japanese photo booth. And it offers a wide range of customization options, so people can edit and decorate their photos with stamps, stickers, frames, filters, a whole bunch of things. And growing up and still to this day, it's like one of my favorite things to do. I always have to beg everyone to go in with me. Even as a child, something about decorating them felt like maybe it was a creative outlet for me. And just the fact that I love decorating things. And this has changed a lot throughout the years. I think because the rise of, technology and social media, it's not the same as it used to be. And I think that just really actually makes it more of a nostalgic symbol for me. Because now whenever I think about purikura, I definitely think about how it used to be back when I was visiting Japan as a child. This is a newer piece, but it is inspired by purikura. And so I thought about all of the different stamps and the different customization options that are, available and that a lot of people use when they're decorating their photos. So I started to look back at all of my old stickers and photos and kind of got all these stamps and messages. And it's been a while since I've used underglaze, and I don't really draw on a lot of my work. So it was actually really nice and fun for me to be able to kind of like draw something on my piece. And this really reminds me of like summertime, Japan, summertime, beach. But I really ended up liking the colors on this one. So this is my chain bowl. And this was also inspired by stickers when I created it at the time. Before this, like I said earlier, I was using a lot of clay additions to try to get those gloops to kind of hang off and drip off of the piece in the firing. But for this one, I would fire the gloop little charms separately. And then I used an epoxy to just kind of stick them like stickers all around the pot. And most of the time, like almost 100% of the time, I don't have a plan for how things are going to look. So I just kept adding things to this one. I would add all the gloop bits all around it. And then I created these hooks that I epoxied onto them. And then I thought, oh, I could add chains. So then I started adding chains. And then I kind of just do it until I look at it and I'm like, okay, I like this. So same with this piece, heavily inspired by stickers. This is another large scale piece that I made. This was the first one where it was like a full-on blank canvas. When I put it into the glaze firing, I just put a pink glaze over the entire thing and nothing else. So when it came out, it really felt like a blank canvas. Everything that's on here was like added after. And I just, same thing with epoxy, just kind of plopped it on without thinking. And I think that whole idea of play in my process really shows here. And this also reminds me of fridge magnets, which I didn't like, that wasn't the plan, but after I kind of stepped back, I was like, oh, these kind of look like fridge magnets. And that also kind of ties into the childhood, theme that I was going with. And this is my second floor lamp. I tried to scale it back. This is scaling it back for me. I tried to scale it back a little bit. And I did something different. I used colored clay and then a glaze over it. And one of the reasons why I love hand building, and especially coil building, is just that texture and the ways that different glaze changes the texture of, the surface there. And then the way that different lighting changes the texture as well. There's something that I really love about that. And then when it was finished, I was like, oh, it needs some kind of hanging element. So I added a little bit of chain. And then on the inside, I added some simple charms so that if you look through the holes of the shade, you can kind of see stuff hanging there. So just a work in progress of that table that I showed earlier. Building large is something that I really, really love. It's still intimidating to me, and every time I do it, I'm still terrified. It's a lot of clay. It's a lot of things that could go wrong, but I wonder if that's why I like it. When I make, I'm not much of a planner. I don't really think about the technicals too much. But when I build big, you kind of have to, because there's so much that could go wrong. And then, for example, you have to think about internal structures so things don't, collapse on each other or crack in the firing. So it's a different way of making for me. And I wonder if that's why I like it, but I do love creating large. And here is me and my friend Maggie. We are loading my lamp into the electric kiln. So I built the lamp upside down because the temperature of the kiln gets really high. So if it was the other side, there's a big chance for the heavy, heavy arms to kind of move. So I decided to build it fully upside down and also on a plaster slab. So if you build it on a plaster slab, you can fire it. We slid it right into the kiln so that I didn't have to pick up such a large and fragile piece. This obviously only works for a front loading kiln, which is a kiln that opens this way. But on the right, you can see kind of how that plaster just kind of breaks down. And at the end, it just comes right off your piece. I also wanted to show the shrinkage. So if you do pottery, I think you know that shrinkage is a thing. And I think I'll always be shocked, especially when I'm creating these large scale things. I think I'm making this gigantic thing. And then when it goes through 2 firings, it feels like it's coming out teeny. Yeah. So I was born in Japan and I moved to Canada at the age of 5. Since then, I've regularly gone back to visit and spend time with family, and it's a very important part of my cultural identity today. I grew up with a lot of culture and tradition in the household, and it's something that impacts me, and it's a part of my everyday life, and it's something that has a lot of influence in my ceramic practice. So I started to think about the different aspects of my cultural identity and the way it affects and impacts my everyday life. And the language is something that serves as an important bridge to my cultural roots and also ties with my family, especially when I'm conversing with my mom, my grandparents, my family in Japan. It's just our language is really an important link, and I really wanted to start incorporating Japanese text into my work. This is me at my kindergarten graduation. So this piece is called the Hiragana Tower. Hiragana is the first of few alphabets you learn when you're learning or you're studying Japanese. And for me, that alphabet really embodies the essence of childhood and makes me think of childhood. And so I often incorporate nerikomi into my work, and that is a traditional Japanese technique to make images or patterns in colored clay. And it involves the arranging, layering, and cutting of colored clay to form different patterns and images. So the way I create these is I coil build and I hand build a structure or a piece. And then I will use colored clay to make different patterns and images. I will slice them up really thin, and then I will patch them onto that already built piece. When I'm making, I don't know if you've seen a lot of nerikomi online, but a lot of it can be really like precise and intricate. I do mine pretty loosely because I want to embody that childhood essence, and I don't want anything to be too perfect, even though I could never make it too perfect anyways. But also when you're making those patterns, you do something called compressing, which means you're compressing your blocks of clay. So sometimes it starts out this big and you're patting it till it gets really tiny. And I also do that pretty loosely because it ends up moving the images and the patterns inside of the clay. And I really like how sometimes, like you can see, like there's a lot of movement in those letters there. Also with the attaching of the colored clay, I found this out, not really, like kind of on accident, but if it's too loose, it'll create all of these cracks. And I did that on a piece before this, and I ended up absolutely loving the cracks. So for this piece, I ended up deliberately like pressing them on pretty loose to try to encourage those superficial cracks on the colored clay. Something about that visual texture I thought really went well with the dryness of the clay. So here's a little before and after that I took of some of examples of my blocks of nerikomi. So I did some letters. So on the left, you can see that it's the pattern or the letters here have been compressed and squished down. And then on the right, it's been cut to show what pattern it is. There is something about this that I love. The way that it's just like, looks like it's fully like squished in there. I'm really into that. And it's only the first slice that ever gets that, because after that it becomes, so it's something that I've thought about trying to somehow, get that and put that into my work. But yeah. So I started thinking about the charms that I was doing and how I could kind of do more with that or evolve that in some way while still incorporating that Japanese text into my work. So I just started creating larger pieces. For this piece here, this is called asobitai. I just did a whole bunch of different patterns, again, with that clay, kind of loosely putting colored clay together and attaching them like patchwork onto the vessel. And then after the firing, I added the letters over the top, and I used putty epoxy here that I stained pink. I really like the way it kind of looks like bubble gum. That was one thing that I really had to think about because I wanted that epoxy to be a part of the piece. I didn't want it to look like I was just using it to glue pieces together. So I wanted to make sure that it was something that, that was a part of it. And now I love using the epoxy. This means I want to play. I'm still going over like that idea and thought of like, sometimes I think like, oh, people might not know what it means. And I've had people tell me that, oh, they don't need to know what it means. It doesn't matter what it means. So that's still something that like I'm thinking about while I'm still creating work with a lot of Japanese text. So this is called Yumemi Gokochi, and this basically means like a dreamy state of mind is the translation of that. It's inspired by my last piece, but obviously I was like, oh, I need to do more. I want to make it. I want to push it further. So I didn't have much plans for this. The first thing I thought was, okay, just make it bigger. So I made it bigger. I made the letters bigger. I made the vessel bigger. I epoxied it together, and then it just didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like, okay, I made it bigger, but like, so what? So then I went into that stash of, stuff I had, kept going until I felt like that's what I wanted it to be. So that was my thesis work. So that was one of like the last things I made at Sheridan. And this is just a little studio picture or progress picture. And it kind of just shows the way that I have all of these extra bits on hand so that if something comes out of the kiln, or if I'm finished playing with a project and I'm like, oh, I feel like I can do something else, I can go to that stash and I can just see if things look good. And some techniques I use. So I like to film myself when I'm trying to do a lot of this lettering work. I'm a very wing it type of person when I'm creating. I love to wing it. But this is the one thing that I try not to. And I try to really think hard about how I want these letters and these additions to look, just because once something is epoxied, obviously it's epoxied forever. So that's one aspect where I try to do a little bit of planning. So I'll film myself and I'll kind of just like put those bits and pieces all around. And then I'll watch back on the video and I'll just see if anything sticks out to me or if I like the look of anything. For smaller pieces, I like to use hot glue. So I'll hot glue pieces together, different arrangements. Again, video myself putting them around the piece till I see what I like. And then when pieces are really, really big, where you just don't have enough hands to put everything in front of the camera, I do some Photoshop, which takes a lot of time, but it's worth it for a big piece. So I Photoshopped all of the letters and I kind of arranged them in different, arches just to see, because I feel like it's the main part, it's a big part of my piece and it's something that's important. So I want to make sure that I have the right thing. And then after something's epoxied, I tape it up. And sometimes it's funny the way that you have to hold your pieces together, but it's kind of fun taping something up like this, going home, and then the next morning coming in, and it's just like undoing everything to reveal the final. And again, it's just part of the process that makes ceramics really fun for me. So this piece, otome. So for an example for this is a 3-letter word. It means like girl. It's like a feminine way. And I really wanted to use it and I thought it really matched the vase, but it was a 3-letter word. And so when I was putting the 3 letters on top of the vase, I was like, oh, this is too short. So again, I went to my stash of goodies and I had lots of those extra stars lying around. So then I was able to kind of make that longer and bigger so that it looked proportionate around the vessel there. Just another, the latest maybe table lamp I've made, just using colored clay. I tried to get a little bit more pigment out of this. And then I used a clear gloss over it just to really get that brightness of the colored clay out. And then throughout making all my pieces over the past 2 years, this whole time I've been talking about all those bits and pieces I have on the side, I ended up with so much of it. And even when those bits and pieces have broken, I've always kept it to the side because I always thought, oh, I'm going to use them at some point, or I could use them at some point. So for this piece, I kind of experimented with doing like a collage. So I grabbed those bits and pieces, I used epoxy, and I just epoxied them on a clay tile that I made. No really plan for this one. I just started plopping things down and layering it until I ended up liking the look of it. And then I also did it, I wanted to see how it would look on a 3D vessel. So I had like a wheel thrown bowl that I had lying around, and I have like so much of this stuff. And it's really fun to just pick and choose and then seeing them all together at the end. So continuing on with using colored clay and the nerikomi, instead of patches, I decided to do one pattern and kind of patch that all over the piece to kind of create something that looks like a repeated pattern. This was also the first time using black in like my colored clay stuff, and I really like the way that the black came out. So I started doing more. This is my latest kind of work, made at Harborfront. Till here, I was doing like those Japanese text, and it was kind of like the flat cookie-like text. And I wanted to create these like bubbly English letters. And then this was really scaling it back for me because of the amount of white I've left in the piece. And animal print is something that I've been really into lately. And I'm trying to incorporate that into my work while keeping it or while making it contemporary, which is a little bit of a challenge, I think, for me anyways. And I've also been really interested in the idea of mixing and matching. So before, when I thought, oh, I don't want things to clash, now I'm like, maybe I do want things to clash in a way that makes sense. I don't know. So I just started like putting things on top of each other, and I had this tabletop for another piece I made, and I ended up putting it on top of there, and I actually really ended up liking the way it looks together. So that just became one piece. And then this is also a newer piece. Going off with the clashing, right? I was obviously into animal print. So I got like a blue, black, and pink leopard print on the background. I did a zebra print with the yellow and the white. And the original plan for this was to put it over the top like all my other pieces. But then when I saw it in front, the clashing of the colors and the animal print is just something I ended up really liking the look of. So that's where I went with this one. Again, still using the epoxy to kind of just like smush it on there. So yeah, this was the original tabletop for this piece that I ended up using for the other one. So I decided to make another one, and I didn't want to make the exact same one, so I used a different design. But this is a new kind of technique that I was just experimenting with, using, again, blocks of colored clay, slicing them into little tiles and kind of patching them. And patching them was kind of fun because it was kind of like bricking something up. And I like the way that it just like looks like cobblestone. And the pixelated kind of characters, these characters that I grew up with that I'm still obsessed with. Trying to use things that I like in my life and put that into my work, because for me, that makes my work so much more interesting to me. But yeah, again, trying to do that in a way that looks good, I guess. And then, so I actually like to do a lot of tiles as tests. So I'll often make tiles to try out different patterns. I'll try overfiring things. I'll try underfiring things. A lot of times I have extra colored clay or extra patterns that I will roll out onto these tiles. If I have a design or a pattern in mind, but I don't have an idea yet of what I want to actually make with it, I'll often make it into a tile just so I have that on the side that I can look at and think, okay, yes, I wanted to do this design, so now I can make something. This is also something that I have a lot of, and at some point I know I'll have a project for it, with all of these tiles that I've made over the years. Yeah, at some point it's going to be something. Oh, explosions. Okay. So some explosions. This one is absolutely insane. I don't even know what that could have been. There's so many layers to that explosion. But it's funny because I teach kids here at DVSA, and I'm always like, oh, if you don't listen to those clay rules, your things might explode. And they're always like, no, you're lying. And then I show them this and they go crazy. They're like, oh my goodness. But yeah, it's just, it happens. I try not to get too down about it. Remaking things isn't too big of a deal, but it's just learning what I did wrong and how I could prevent that from happening again. So I am now currently a full-time artist in residence at Harbourfront Centre in Toronto. I started my residency June 1st of this year. Super, super excited to continue growing my practice there, meeting new people and being a part of that craft community there. Also very excited to be a part of a shared studio again. Having other emerging artists work alongside you, I think, is extremely important. We're able to help each other. We're able to critique each other. And I think it's just a really important part of my practice. And I'm really excited for all the work that I'm going to be able to do here. And just some studio pictures. So this is a studio at Harbourfront. And yeah, as you can see, I have my table there. And there's 5 artists in total. And we all kind of work alongside each other. And it's been great. So that's it for me. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, we have like 15 minutes for that. Yes.
I was just curious about your choice of vases and lamp shapes. What's your thinking behind using those objects?
So a vessel, like the vase shape, you mean?
Yeah, why?
Yeah. So as you can tell, everything. I love the shape of a vessel, and it could come from the tradition of that being very pottery and very ceramics and having that kind of traditional ceramic influence in my life with my family, with like my dad and my grandma. And something about building the vessel is, I think, something that I've always just enjoyed. I do often think about trying to go a more sculptural route and try to incorporate more like sculpture, but I don't know. I always go back to that vessel. I love something about the small feet with the big belly and the big shoulder and then it going back in. And then I think once I found that lettering to go over it, something about that look I really liked. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure why I like the vessel so much, but I'm going to say it could have something to do with the fact that, it's a very traditional pottery shape that it maybe ties me to that part of ceramics. That's a really important part of, my family and just the tradition, I guess, of pottery.
You were saying that you have a whole ton of those little, like stars and happy faces and all these different little bits and chains. Where do you keep them like orderly, or do you keep them sort of chronologically? But how do you store them and then pull them out when you need them?
Somewhat orderly. They're in bins and boxes. And so a lot of times I'm like when I'm using colored clay or anything like that and I have extras, I don't want to throw it out. And I'm usually too lazy to like reclaim just a tiny bit of clay. So I'll end up making them into something and then they'll end up getting into a firing. And when they're done, I just add them to like a box of stuff I already have. So then when it's time for me to decorate a piece and I want to add all that stuff, most of the time I end up like bringing it all out. And then it's like a whole day process of me just like going through everything and just like, and then I'll clean it back up and kind of try to arrange them in some sort of way.
And how fragile are they? Are they?
The chains are very fragile.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't really, I make pretty, no, not too fragile, just the chains. The chains are very fragile. But the chains are also fun because sometimes I make a really long chain. And if it's too long, I can just like break a piece. Do you know what I mean? So I can like shorten it if I need to. Yeah.
That glue clays, do you make it yourself?
So I get it made, but it is the recipe is widely available online. So if you look online, they have recipes for gloop. It's just about finding the right consistency. So they have like soft versions, medium versions, hard ones. Yeah, so it just depends on how much you want it to gloop.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just about the firing. The schedule I use is I have a certain firing schedule for that gloop glaze just to get it to the right, because I don't want it too much where it melts right off the pot. I like it to just kind of settle into itself. But yeah.
How come the Dadama all have 2 eyes?
Sorry?
How come the Dadama,
Do they not?
they have 2 eyes? Do that? The ones I've seen.
Let me look. These ones?
Yeah.
They have 2 eyes?
Yes.
They do, right?
Right. How come they have 2 as opposed to 1 looking out for the wish?
Oh, do they only have 1?
Well, you fill in 1 eye to look out for the wish, and then the other one stays empty, and then when you get the wish, you fill in 2. So I was wondering if the 2 eyes were wishes already granted.
Maybe. The Dharma that I think of when I think about them have always had 2 eyes. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Let me go back to this. Any other questions?
How do you decide to price your pieces? Like, do you base it on time that goes into the piece, or the intricacy, or?
I'm still working on that. I think it's something that, you know, especially for an emerging artist coming kind of right out of graduation too, it's hard to know. I don't think I base it off of time, because, you know, those tiny gloop ones that I showed you takes for like a whole day to do one, to glaze one. I think I base it off of maybe the technique I use and how I've worked to develop what I use, right? But still something that is
Work in progress.
work in progress. I think it's really hard to know how to price your work.
I think that's a challenge for any
Yeah.
artist, right?
Yeah. Seiki?
How come you made the angel pot?
How come? Oh, the angel pot's not on here. Yeah. So wait, I have this one. So this angel pot was, again, it's inspired by Japanese pop culture. You know, whenever I think of that Japanese style, the hibiscus flowers and the angel, the bubble letters, it's just something that's really popular in Japan. And the colored clay was something I was using a lot, but I was really using pink and green as a mix. And I decided, okay, I have to stop using pink and green. So that's why I decided to use the blue, and the blue on the texture actually ended up looking so much like water. And it became this really beachy vibe. But yeah.
Can you speak to the significance of using chains? And sorry if I missed that at some point, but do they have like a symbolism, or do they represent anything?
No. Sorry. I love things hanging. So when I made like that lamp, the first lamp I made, and I put all the charms, like I said, I love the way that it looks like something is like cascading down. And so I just started to think about how else could I add things that hang and that add like a hanging, you know, visual to my pieces. So then I just thought, okay, I could do chains in some sort. And then so I just started making chains, and then just never stopped. Yes.
Do you use sketching as a first?
I should. I've tried. Sometimes I do. I'll do a rough sketch, but it's not a big part of my process at all, really. I wonder, it could be because of the fact that I'm really bad at sketching. I'm especially bad at sketching anything 3D. So when I sketch, it's just like a flat, you know. And sometimes I'll sketch so that I don't forget something. If something pops up in my head and I'm like, okay, wait, I want to make that. Like a lot of times I'll like be in bed, ready to go to bed, and then something will pop up and I'm like, oh, but I won't forget it. But I'm like, what if I will forget it? So I'll wake up and like grab my notebook and just like, I write down ideas more. Like if I have a idea of something, I can see it in my brain. Instead of sketching out what I see in my brain, I'll write out what I see, if that makes sense. So I'll be like big pot with wide shoulders that have this on it, you know? Yeah.
Marina, you use a lot of colored clay, and I know that you've taught workshops for us using colored clay. Are there considerations with that when you work with it? Is it different than working with, say, regular clay? Things you have to
Expensive. Yeah, so stain is expensive, but that's also why, you know, a lot of times when people use colored clay, they will make, or nerikomi, they make the pot out of that clay. But so I was thinking about how can I not use that much colored clay? So that's when I started slicing them and sticking them onto already built pieces. And that would save, and I actually ended up just really liking the look of it because all of the cracking and the patching. But yeah, no, just also pigment, you know, like when you use underglaze, you can get things really bright and vivid. If you want colored clay to be vivid like this, the blue, that's a lot of blue stain.
on top.
Yeah, it's just a lot of blue stain if you want something vibrant, you just need to use a lot of that stain, which it just ends up being, you know, a little bit more expensive, but yeah.
Does it pretty much fire the same and everything like that?
Yeah, I think some colors, you know, like the higher you get, but because I'm only going to a cone 6, usually the firing's fine. I think once you go higher than a cone 6, then stains, you know, become more, they might change color or they might go brown or stuff like that. But because I'm firing to cone 6, I usually have no problem. Under firing though, definitely mutes the colors and dulls it. So I try not to underfire anything.